joining from Cosmopolitics and What the Hell to take the edge off the week, talk about some of the headlines that resonated with us. Why don't you, in the comments, let us know what resonated with you? We have a little bit of breaking news. I just saw there was a school shooting at Florida State University. At least one student dead, suspect in custody. So obviously, we'll be watching that and hope that the casualties weren't too high. But Dany, I mean, let's dive right in. Tell us about your cocktail.
Okay, first, yes, let's really,
This is what's
going from school
important.
shooting to cocktails is not exactly the transition I was
No.
looking for, Elise Labbit. But folks, I named it after Basil Fawlty. It is my weakness. Everybody who knows me knows that I have a weakness for British comedy. Fawlty Towers put out, if I'm correct, 13 episodes at the end of the 60s, beginning of the 70s. It's laugh out loud funny if you like British humor, and that is a particular taste. So we named it for Basil Fawlty. It's really basil, simple syrup, shaken up with sugar. Shaken up, mashed with sugar. You add some lime. You add some gin or some vodka. Elise is the vodka woman today. I'm always gin woman because that's just who I am. And thank you, Peggy, for loving British humor. And shaky, shaky, and add some tonic, and it's delicious. It's really fresh. It's really nice. The basil isn't too forward, and it's a marvelous drink. The only difference I would make with the recipe that I posted on our Substack is that I would use simple syrup. I wouldn't try and make the simple syrup in the cocktail shaker by itself because it ends up being kind of grainy and too much effort for my spindly arms. All right, Elise, let's talk substance. We have a bunch of things on our list today, and we teased that we are going to be talking about Kilmar Abrego
You
Garcia.
know, I am so amazed. Oh, this is what I wanted. I was thinking about what I wanted to mention to you. I was amazed how this story resonated with everybody. I think a lot of us might have seen it was on Substack. I know I was talking to you about it the other day about Senator Chuck Grassley in Iowa did a town hall. And we all know that, a lot of the Republican lawmakers have been, getting a lot of questions, let's say, that they normally wouldn't get from their constituents. And there's been a little hesitation to have some town halls because there was a lot of screaming, a lot of shouting. Credit to Senator Grassley for going out there. But I was really surprised that the Kilmar Abrego Garcia story really resonated. And these are some people in very red states with a lot of these people were in MAGA hats saying that this particular issue, the idea of, and we can get to this in a minute, about the perceived defiance of a Supreme Court order, really upset them. And they think that, the rule of law, actually, it does seem that this is something that's resonated even with Trump supporters.
Elise, I
Oh,
am willing to bet
Danny.
that there isn't a single person with a MAGA hat out there who is saying to themselves, gee, I wish the president hadn't deported that illegal
When
alien
we get more
member
tech,
of
when
MS-13
we get more
right here.
technology, we'll roll the videotape. But these are people that see what's happening. Maybe they didn't have all the background on the guy, but they said, the idea that you're sending a guy off to El Salvador, throwing him in jail. The Supreme Court said that he shouldn't be deported. And we could talk about the difference between
Hey,
facilitating or expatiating or whatever the fuck they said.
dude,
Um,
take a
yeah,
sip.
dude. Okay.
Have a sip of your drink. Let's start with some facts. Okay, this guy was an illegal alien and deportable. There was a
Deportable to any country but El Salvador.
keep drinking and let me finish my
Okay.
sentence.
Okay.
This guy was
We really love each other.
twice affirmed by a judge to be a member of an infamous gang, MS-13. Okay, the one piece of information we have about him prior to his current deportation is that there was a judicial order that he not be deported to El Salvador, where he had fear because he was a member of MS-13 of being killed by a member of a rival gang. I don't know what our judiciary is doing getting in the middle of rival gangs in El Salvador, but that's a different question. The Trump administration deported him to El Salvador. Now, I think there are really good cases here where you can make an argument that the Trump administration has gone way way out over his skis on deportation, and we could talk about that. But in this case, Kay, they admitted they shouldn't have deported him, and that was the cause of the first judicial order,
And
which
said,
was
oopsie. That's what President Trump tweeted. Oopsie.
the judge said that they needed to effectuate his return. This went up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court did not use the word effectuate. And I realize that there are people in America who think that the Supreme Court is a joke, and who think that judicial language isn't important. But the Supreme Court said you need to facilitate his return. Now, what does facilitate mean? It does not mean effectuate. Effectuate means get your butt down here, do that now. Facilitate means help this guy get back. Now, where I think we will be in agreement on this, because I have no sympathy, illegal alien, MS-13, wife beater, uh, uh, no sympathy whatsoever. If I had to pick a guy who I was going to stand by, I would pick one of those accused terrorists, not this guy down in El Salvador, as two members of Congress have done, including the Maryland senator, who really ought to know better. So the idea that this is a challenge to the Constitution, I think there are things we're going to talk about later in this chat that are really bigger questions of a challenge to the Constitution. This ain't it. I
I
have
just,
no sympathy with this guy.
even if you have,
Cheers.
but cheers, cheers. But, listen, you don't have sympathy for the guys, but are principles when they're convenient and we like the guy, or when they're not inconvenient and we don't like the guy? I feel like it's a
That's
precedent.
well said. You,
I think the
it's
idea
fair.
about, I'm sorry, you and I have a lot of talk, and I say, don't give me whataboutism. And you say, oh, fuck whataboutism. I hate whataboutism. But I feel like this is a case where parsing between effectuate and facilitate is bullshit. The Supreme Court said that he shouldn't be deported, and help get in plain language. Or as Ali Brennan, this woman at Substack, said, as there's this podcast where there's like a woman in a rural state, as Tracy would hear it, or whatever she was saying, for the people in the cheap seats, it means help get him back here. He shouldn't have been
Oh
deported, and help
no,
get him back here. And the
sorry.
idea that
That's not how it works. That's not how the law
wait,
works.
let me finish. This is a precedent, and I think you're going to see them doing this a lot, parsing between words. I think the Supreme Court wasn't like, just ignore it, or they would have even taken the case.
Again, the words are different, and if they choose to illuminate it, then they are going to do that, because the initial judge who they sent it back to, is going to do it, and then we'll come back to it and start swearing at each other
What
again.
about
And
some
I
of these
remind you,
other
your mother
arrests?
is on.
Yes, she is.
Language, language.
She's quite aware. Janice Labott is quite aware of my potty mouth. What about some of these other arrests, though, that we were talking about? Mahmoud, is it Mahmoud Khalil? Is his name?
There's a case of Mahmoud Khalil, which really I think is one of those. He was that was affirmed by the courts
That's
last
not
week.
a cause célèbre. I would not be willing to die on that hill,
Right,
because he,
big
is
time Hamas supporter.
and
Big.
also, inciting to violence from a university. I'm not willing to die on that hill. But there have been other arrests. There was the arrest of this, and I know you wrote about this when we're talking about anti-Semitism. There have been arrests of, this tough student.
Her name is Rumesa Öztürk, and in her case, this is a situation where you get sort of real creepy vibes from the ICE people, because there are other cases where we have individuals who are clearly deportable. And by the way, the right of deportation for a president is very, very broad. We have to say that in the first instance. But this woman, who is a PhD student at Tufts, has done is being sort of scooped up in this group of terrorists and terrorist supporters who are being deported. Now, she is an observant Muslim woman. She wears a hijab. She wrote a piece for the Tufts newspaper in support of boycott, divestment, and sanctions of Israel, which is itself controversial, but certainly not illegal in the United States. Supporting something that isn't illegal is not tantamount to joining Hamas. And although her sympathies are clear, she did nothing. She wasn't part of an encampment. She wasn't an encampment leader like Mahmoud Khalil and others. So she has been arrested. She's being held in Louisiana. And this is a case where I agree with all of the critics of the administration. This is why, when you want to do something like this, you've got to be absolutely perfectly careful. Unlike you, I don't want to defend someone from MS-13, but I am really happy to defend Rumeysa Öztürk unless
I'm
somebody is able
defending the
to.
principle. Let's. I'm not defending the guy. I'm defending the.
Hey, the guy comes with the package. But but in this case, and I think this is a much better case, and I don't understand why members of Congress are not up in arms about that one and are up in arms about some gang member. In this case, I have not seen any evidence. So I think they need to be, look, you if you're doing something like this, you need to be extra careful,
Well,
and
it's
they're not
true,
being.
and it is true that like visas, green cards, they do come with stipulations. We saw this Palestinian student. He was involved in the protest. From what I've read, it doesn't seem like
Are we
he.
talking about Khalil?
No, we're talking about Mohsen Madawi, green card holder, went in for his citizenship interview and was arrested.
I, I told you before,
For
I don't know the particulars of that case, so I don't want to opine on it. But I do think anytime you make a mistake, including cases where the person is deeply objectionable in and of themselves, anytime you make a mistake, you cast a shadow over the decision making that's
well,
going
exactly,
on,
and I
and
mean,
that's the issue.
it's the whole idea of due process. But let's
Baby, move on. Let's talk
move
about
on.
Iran.
Move on. Okay, what the hell is going on? To quote a very famous Substack.
Right.
Um, First round of talks sounds like
Last
there was
weekend.
first
Last
round of talks
weekend.
was last weekend. Both came out with some vague but flowery statements about it was in a good atmosphere. Then there was like a big whiplash this week with Steve Witkoff at first saying, "Oh, sure, Iran can enrich if they like," and then walking it back after he got some criticism. What the hell is going on?
So you had a great piece on this, and everybody go and look at Cosmopolitics because Elise's piece came out this morning. I have a piece that's coming out tomorrow morning, and I just list. And let me give everybody a preview. What Steve Witkoff said on April 11th. He told the Wall Street Journal, quote, "I think our position begins with the dismantlement of your program. That's our position today. That doesn't mean, by the way, that at the margin we're not going to find other ways to find compromise between the two countries." I'm sorry, what? What? You're capitulating before you even get to your second meeting? 3 days later, he sounds a little smarter and he says Iran doesn't need to enrich beyond 3.67%. 3.67% is what you need for a nuclear reactor, for nuclear
Nuclear.
medicine, for stuff like it's a peaceful nuclear program. The Iranians are at 60%. Well, that's not a peaceful nuclear program. But he still talks about the Iranian ability to enrich uranium, which is should be a red line. Then, then 2 days later, 3 days later, is he's on X after a White House meeting on the topic, and he says a deal with Iran is only going to be completed if it is a Trump deal. Any final arrangement must set a framework for peace, stability, and prosperity, and Iran must stop and eliminate its nuclear enrichment and weaponization program. Oh, you see that door kind of closing, 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 and then thwack. So my question is, what are they going to talk about on Saturday?
Well, first of all, say what you will about Mike Waltz and Marco Rubio, and that they're, kind of getting, iced out, no pun intended, by some of the more MAGA crowd. These are very hawkish people on Iran. They don't want to see a deal. They don't want to see a Trump deal where Trump just basically like signs something. It doesn't have any teeth. They don't want anything. They want a
It's
stronger
what you
deal.
called it. You said this is like JCPOA two,
Yeah, and
and
it's
you're right.
also, I mean, I also called it like negotiation by mood ring. It's like, they have to, I think one of the big problems is they don't understand the Iranian nuclear program. Like, I don't even know if they read any IAEA reports. The IAEA just recently said, like last week, they're pretty close to a bomb. So, I mean, I think if you're going to go into these kind of negotiations, and we've talked about this before, the Iranians are they may
They're
be
so
horrible
good.
terrorists, but they're good negotiators. And you saw the foreign minister in the Washington Post a couple of weeks ago talking about, dissing Biden a little bit. Trump has so, boldly wanted to have this
Trillions
negotiation.
of dollars of
Yes,
investment.
yes, the Americans, the water's warm. Come on in. Um, the
Me
Iranians
and
are
my
shrewd
hijab.
negotiate. The Iranians are shrewd negotiators, and I don't. Trump has a lot of leverage right now because Iran has never been at a weaker than it is right now after Hamas, after Hezbollah, now the Houthis, and we could talk. There's a story out about the Chinese and the Houthis, but Iran is at its weakest point. There's a lot of leverage here, and I think Trump has, what I said is, and I got a little flack from it, but them the breaks. I think Trump might be able to do what Obama isn't, to get a tougher deal because A, he's not afraid to walk away. B, he can play Israel a little bit better, and he doesn't have he's immune to the kind of criticism that Obama seemed to be.
Well,
Seemed to
that's
be.
true, but I don't agree with you. Look, again, if people are really interested in this, first, Elisa's Substack, I'm going to have a piece up tomorrow, but on our podcast, my podcast with Mark Thiessen, also called "What the Hell Is Going On," because apparently we have
That's
no
all we say
information.
these days.
Because that's all we say all the time. We talked to Elliot Abrams about this, and I think the
Oh,
issue
that's a
here.
great guess.
Yeah, I
He's
love
great.
Elliot, and the transcript of that is going to be on the Substack tomorrow. But what I wanted to say is the key here to understand, and we discussed this much more in depth with Elliot and without alcohol, is that the nuclear program is intrinsic to Iran's regime's self-preservation plan. And so the idea that they are going to give this up seems to me to be beyond the realm of the possible. That is our history. We have negotiated with them on and off and off and on for 30 years, never successfully, because they want this program. They think this is their, pun intended, trump card. This is going to protect them when all else goes to hell. And in their world, everything has gone to hell.
So basically it's bomb them or nothing. And it seems like if you read the New York Times story, the Israelis wanted to bomb them, and Trump is like, you don't, and he
We'll
basically
see.
backed them off. We'll
Yeah, no,
see.
he definitely did, and the question is just, why? I can't tell. And my hope is that we're being played. My fear is that we're not being played, and that Trump is, making the world great for Iran again, making Iran great again. Eh, I want to talk to you about Jay Powell, another one where
Head
I
of the
said,
Fed. Oh my God, this
uh,
is really interesting. He's kind of, Powell is the second term Comey, right? Um,
I don't think he would appreciate that
Well, I'm just
that
in the
appellation.
idea that these, Powell's the head of the Federal Reserve, Comey the head of the FBI. These are positions that have independence, and whoever appoints them, they're in for a certain term, and they're supposed to be independent from firing. Powell has had some. First of all, even Trump came in wanting Powell to reduce interest rates, to you
Trump
know
appointed Powell. So Trump appointed Powell in 2018. It's a 4-year
Right,
term.
but he
It's
can't
a
fire.
four-year
He
term. He got
technically can't
renewed.
fire him.
Right. So what Trump is trying to do is he's trying to challenge the question of whether the president can fire heads of independent
Well,
agencies.
before that, he wanted Powell to reduce interest rates, and Powell's like, the economy's not ready for that. And on top of
And
that,
wait. Why is the economy not ready for that? Because
of tariffs.
no kidding,
Well, and
right?
then also, basically, Powell came out the other day and basically said these tariffs are we find ourselves in a challenging scenario. He basically said that the tariffs announced so far go well beyond what the Fed had expected. And in a recent speech in the Fed in the Economic Club of Chicago, said that this is not good for the market. It's not good for the labor market. It's not good for inflation. And so on top of the idea that he's not, and that's why they won't lower interest rates. And now Powell basically is like, I want to fire him. And the question is, can he fire him? Powell said he won't resign. So if Trump wants to try and fire him, and now the Supreme Court is taking it up.
So the Supreme Court hasn't taken this up yet. Well, the Supreme Court has taken up a separate question which relates to two other independent boards, nominally
Right.
independent people. But clearly
This is about the Fed.
the law that created the Fed, by the way, to protect the body from FDR. Okay, so let's just, Franklin
Blame it
Delano
on the
Roosevelt.
Dems, Dany.
Yeah, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, not my favorite president. FDR was unhappy, very similar vibe to Donald Trump in this way, right? Really unhappy, and Congress passed the God, I'm gonna never get the name right, so I'm not even gonna say it, in 1935, and created the current system, which really which creates the Fed as an independent body. Now, Trump wants to challenge this. This went to the courts. This went already to the Supreme Court decades ago, and the president's right to fire independent agency heads is very, very limited, only to malfeasance, frankly. Now, not lowering interest rates, because, by the way, Donald Trump slapped tariffs on, lifted tariffs, slapped them on again, made an exception, lifted the exception, not being willing to lower interest rates because of concern about inflation, because of what Donald Trump did, seems to me not to be at malfeasance. So
Okay, the
this, I think,
question,
yeah,
yeah, the question of the day, let us know what you think in the comments. Should the Supreme Court or, should the president be able to fire the Fed chair? I mean, obviously, we're talking about the Supreme Court is about this other case, but the idea is, should the president have I'm guessing we're going to say no, but
I'm a no. I'm a
I'm
hard
an
no on this one.
I'm a hard no too. All right, let's move on to, I know this story. Do you want to go to the COVID lab or you want to go to Harvard?
I want to talk about Harvard. I want to talk about Harvard. So again, this is an issue, and you guys, everybody heard up front. By the way, let me remind everybody, we've got a couple questions from people that we're going to turn to in a minute. But if you've got questions, toss them into the right message at the bottom there, and let us know, and we'll do our best to get to them.
Or
So
cocktail recipes.
yeah, or well, and never hesitate to ask me for cocktail recipe tips. So Harvard University, right? So people may remember that as part of Trump's efforts to corral both DEI, racial preferences, and anti-Semitism at a variety of universities, the Trump administration has basically put federal subsidies for these universities, federal grants, including for scientific research at these universities, on the line. And so Columbia did a deal with the Trump administration. Others have done deals. Harvard basically said, drop dead. No, we're not going to do a deal with you. And the Trump administration turned it to 11, as they always did. Yet another great reference to a fabulous documentary. And what happened as a result is that Trump went even further, right? Said that he is going to try to use the IRS to take away Harvard's 501c3 status, said that he is going to try to deny them the, oh my God, $9 billion in federal subsidies that Harvard gets. Why is Harvard getting so much? That did kind of appall me. And go after their right to bring in foreign students, which, as both Elise and I know, is a massive cash cow. I think Trump's gone too far. The Wall Street Journal editorialized that he had gone too far. Others have editorialized that he has gone too far, that he is confusing the issues, and in his desire to corral the people at Harvard. Elise, what do you think?
Well, and I think also, again, these are about precedents, right? Like he's trying to do it. And, look, he did it with the Weiss law firm, and the Weiss law firm caved. He did it with some of these networks, CBS, ABC. ABC caved, right? They want to stay in his good graces. They want to get the money. They don't want to, face concessions. Harvard said, piss off. And I think other universities now will have the courage to be able to do the same. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
they have to have
look.
donors with big pockets. And look, there's questions about how Harvard handled, the protests and all of that. But again, principles are principles only when they're inconvenient. And so, I think Harvard did the right thing. I hope other universities follow suit.
I don't hope other universities follow suit. I hope saner minds prevail in the Trump administration. That may be a laugh
Good
line for
luck with
some
that.
people.
Good luck with
Yes,
that.
thank
Let's
you for
move
that.
on to the COVID lab. We're running out of time, so
All right.
and
Well,
we want to get to
I
Elon
do want
Musk.
to address, I do want to address one of the questions, and then let's just talk about COVID, and we'll just leave it hanging out there for people to think about. One of the questions we got asked was why it is that some people are suggesting that Putin, that Putin was actually kind of forced into the position of having to invade Ukraine. And so, again, the argument there is that NATO expansion in the wake of the collapse of the Soviet Union was such that it was threatening to Putin, and that he is surrounded by NATO countries, and that he is worried about his own security and worried about his sphere of influence. And the answer is, if you're a nice guy, you're not worried about that kind of thing. It's only when you have designs on other people that you worry about that kind of thing. NATO was a promise that we offered to the Warsaw Pact countries during the Cold War. You want to be on Team NATO, you want to be on Team America. No, not that Team America, but Team America, the good one. And the idea that we would suddenly pull back, that we would never offer NATO membership to either Ukraine or to others, is appalling. Putin does not get to dictate what other countries do. This is an argument that is being made by apologists for the Kremlin, nothing more, and there's really no credibility to it. And I would add, there has never been a plan or an offer extended to Ukraine to actually be a part of NATO. They want to be, but the NATO members have never even offered it to them.
It's ironic that before the invasion, they were so like the idea that they were credible potential members was like laughable. But if anything, the war showed that that they would actually be like they would be, strong members of NATO compared to some of the other countries. But, obviously there's a list of criteria that you meet. Ukraine was nowhere near meeting it before. So that was really kind of a false flag about, the concern that they would join NATO. Um,
Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. No, it
so,
really
Mr.
it really
Galinsky,
is.
I hope that answers your question. Should we close on Elon Musk?
Oh my God. Oh, so gross. Give me 3 minutes of ick. Go
Oh,
for it,
okay. So there's
Elise.
this story in the Wall Street Journal about how, Musk has somewhere between 14 or more children with four women, including the pop musician Grimes, an executive at his brain computer company. Basically, people think sources say it's much higher than known. This is a story in the Wall Street Journal. And he's paying these people like, millions of dollars, $100,000 a month in exchange for an NDA. Basically, why? Because he thinks that he wants to populate uh, the world with his intelligent seed.
It's
Basically, literally, he wants to, populate the planet with super intelligent people that could go to space, that could be part of his, NASA project. And in Musk's dark, this is a quote, in Musk's dark view of the world, civilization is under threat because of declining population. He's driven to correct the historic moment by helping seed the earth with more human beings of high intelligence.
we need barf emojis.
I mean,
You
I
know,
hope this isn't become a trend. Could you imagine?
okay, A, it's not going to become a trend, but also if you are a person who let's just take this on the let's just pretend this is
Okay.
serious and not
Okay, let's pretend it's okay.
gross, right?
Yeah.
If you are a person who actually believes that there should be more children in the world, and I believe that I've, got four kids, I believe there should be more children in the world. I think it's, I love children, but the notion that you should be spawning these weird chemically raised children who don't have a father, right? Who don't have a father. Because I mean, I'm not thinking to myself that Elon Musk is going to be daddy to all of these guys. He's paternity daddy, he's money daddy, but he's certainly not going to be a father to all of these kids. And you missed the grossest part, which is that he wants them all to move on to this weird compound. it's some sort of Charles Manson like stuff. It's crazy. And again, least common denominator stuff. When you have somebody who is doing something hugely important, whether it's SpaceX or it's Tesla's or it's Doge, the idea that that's who they are is absolutely repulsive.
And there's just this, I mean, forget about the grossness and the science of it all. It's just so freaking arrogant, right? It's like, oh,
Ah,
I think there should be more like
more
Danny
me,
Pledges
more of me.
and more of me. All right, unfortunately, we're at time, but we hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next Thursday at
Thanks for
5:30
the
with a
barf
new
emojis,
cocktail,
everybody.
new hot takes. Put your comments in the chat, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Cheers.
Bye. Bye, Elise.
Bye bye.
Ciao.